You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Kerry Greenaway and Mark Manley on the Dark Mirror Paranormal Show, only on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening and welcome to the Dark Mirror Paranormal Show on a Friday evening. I'm Kerry Greenaway. I'm one of your hosts, and the other host I have in the studio with me tonight is my usual gorgeous, sexy Mark Manley. Good evening, Mark.
My name's Gaz Rooney. I see you, Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy Cranky.
Oh,
hiya. Hello.
Started already. Oh, my goodness.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Calm it down, boy.
Everybody in the chat room, you all right? Yeah, we all know you're happy, don't we?
I'm very happy. However, that's a different subject completely. Now,
aliens.
Tonight, I'm going to ask you a question, Mark. I'm actually going to ask you a question to start.
Okay.
Who's your favourite Sherlock Holmes actor?
I like Benedict Cumberbatch, but I think Jeremy Brett played it best.
See, I'm old school. I like Basil Rathbone.
Basil Rathbone, yeah, the black and white ones, they were good, but Jeremy Brett played him the closest to the books because he had the drug problem in there and everything.
Well, I have to say, I hadn't really thought about Jeremy Brett until I posted up a post earlier about this very subject, and the name came up. So I went away onto YouTube and I had a little look. And yes, what's common between all of these amazing actors is their voice. They've all got incredible voices, haven't they?
Yes, they have, indubitably. They very, very good voices for the part that they portray.
Well, I have requested from Mark tonight that whilst we're talking about our subject, he rocks out his very best Sherlock Holmes voice for us. So look forward to that throughout the show. Our subject tonight is actually Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, I have to say his full name because it's just astonishingly great. Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle. I love that, Ignatius.
Yeah.
He was born on the 22nd of May in 1859 in Edinburgh in Scotland.
He was, which is very strange because the family were Irish, but, you know. Do you know what I can't get in my head is Conan Doyle writing the Sherlock Holmes books. When, as we all know, Sherlock, Daniel Moriarty, talks like that. And I've just got the vision of them, Jesus, sir, and he turned round to a sidekick and he went, feck it,
I probably didn't speak like that. There's probably more a Scottish accent, I would have thought.
No, the family were Irish.
Yeah, well,
although they lived in Edinburgh.
Prosperous Irish Catholic family. You're right. They were a prosperous Irish Catholic family living in Scotland.
Prosperous.
I know, yes. I can't speak. Now, his father was an alcoholic, and his mother basically tried to hold everything together, Mary Doyle. She was the one that introduced him to books, and she was a master storyteller in her own right. And I found out a little quote that Arthur said about his mum. And it said, in my early childhood, as far as I can remember, anything at all the vivid stories she would tell me stand out so clearly that they obscure the real facts of my life. I just think that's so lovely. The fact that that storytelling got him through probably a really difficult time of his life with his father.
Well, see, she tells stories how I do the stories, doesn't I? When I used to read stories to Becky and Terry when they were little, and I read them to little Alfie as well, and I do all the different voices, and I ad-lib, and I'll add extra bits, and this, that, and the other, and leave long pauses where I just look at him shaking my head and things like that, you know. Hasn't been fits of laughter, so you'll remember them.
So, and I think that's, you know, where his initial spark of inspiration came for becoming such a prolific writer and creating such amazing stories that he wrote.
Well, if I remember rightly, the Sherlock Holmes stories originally started as short stories in the newspaper, didn't they? He was asked to write a series of short stories for the newspaper.
Yeah, I mean, he started off, I mean, we looked into his background an awful lot, really, quite a lot, actually. But he actually started off in the medical profession. He started off in, you know, the universities, didn't he?
Well, to be absolutely honest, with his voice and standing and the way he held himself, it's not really surprising. You can just see him standing up at the front of the class, you know, being an orator for everybody.
Yeah, he wasn't what you would call... he got sent, before he went to university, basically, he got sent to a Jesuit boarding school. That was actually paid for by other members of the family. But it was so strict and it didn't fit with his character at all. He didn't like that restriction on him at all. He hated it. I mean, he said... I found quite a lot of quotes that he said about his life, which was really quite good. He said about these early years, he said, perhaps it was good for me that the times were hard, for I was wild, full-blooded and a trifle reckless. But the situation called for energy and application, so that one was bound to try and meet it. My mother had been so splendid that I could not fail her. I mean, he clearly adored his mum.
There is a bit of a mum complex going on there, yeah.
But then, I mean, I found this was awful. When he graduated from, like, school, basically, he had to commit his father to a lunatic asylum for his alcoholism, because his alcoholism had sent him a bit doolally.
Did you write him out?
Yeah.
Well, no, can I just say one thing?
To actually commit him, he actually committed him, and I believe his father died in the lunatic asylum. And the idea of the trauma that this caused him led him to write the story The Surgeon of Gastafel, in 1880. And then he decided, and at that point, it was then he decided then to follow a medical career.
And he was influenced by the lodger, Dr. Brian Charles Waller.
Yeah, because when his dad got committed, his mum actually took a lodger in to, like, help supplement their income, basically. And that's basically who, you know, influenced his decision to go into the medical career. So he went to the University of Edinburgh to study medicine, basically. Now, at the university, oh my God, he met so many amazing people throughout his life. At the University of Edinburgh, while he was there, he met James Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan, amongst other things, and Robert Louis Stevenson, who wrote Treasure Island and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
This is very, very true. And Paul in the chat room pointed out that doctor who was a lodger inspired Dr. Watson's character. And also, may I just say and point out to those chuckleheads in the chat room, I'll be seeing you at some point soon, young man.
Oh, are they talking about your little faux pas last week?
My little faux pas, yeah. They're not.
It's okay.
They wouldn't let it lie.
We time travelled back and we changed that little faux pas for you. So you're not, you know, so it's all good.
Gits. Anyway.
I think you've been well and truly caned this week on that particular subject.
I have. It's getting to the point of, you're so funny, I haven't heard it before. Yeah.
Oh, bless you. Anyway, when he was at university, he had a teacher called Dr. Joseph Bell, who was a master. Now, is this resonating even with anybody? He was a master at observation, logic, deduction, and diagnosis.
Yes. Yes,
Does that sound familiar,
fun.
anybody?
Does, yes.
I wonder where he
Mr.
got his
Holmes,
inspiration
let's do
for
it.
the lovely Sherlock Holmes. He missed
Sherlock
out
Holmes,
arrogant, self-centered, selfish. He missed out a few terminologies there, didn't he? Because
That's why I like. I was going to say that's why I like the Jeremy Brett one, because he portrayed it almost faithfully to the books. You know, with the little foibles and the arrogance and the up his own bottom and the slight penchant for what was that drug made out of poppies? They used to have dens. That's it, opium. Yeah, he had a little problem with opiates, didn't he?
Yeah, that's true. Now, he did write a short story whilst at university. It was called The Mystery of I can never say this one. Okay, the Sasar Valley.
Sasar Valley, yes.
And this was his very first published article in an Edinburgh magazine called The Chambers Journal. And that same year, he wrote a second story called The American Tale that was published in London Society. And he said about this, "It was in this year that I first learned that shillings might be earned in other ways than filling files." I love that.
Okay.
He first opened his eyes to actually, getting an income from writing, which, was sort of...
Like I say, when I read his life story and saw it on the TV and everything, he was approached by somebody from the local rags, and they asked him if he'd write a couple of stories for it first. And that's when he started writing Sherlock.
Yeah. Well, at 20 years... Now, see, this is absolutely astonishing because it shows he had a sense of adventure as well. He never sort of turned down travelling, because at 20 years old and in his third year of medical studies, so clearly he was obviously getting a little bit bored, and he was offered the post of a ship's surgeon on the Hope, which was a whaling boat that was going to go to the Arctic Circle. Now, the Hope first stopped near the shores of Greenland, where back in the day they used to hunt for seals. There was a big outcry in the 80s about that. But at the time, he was on a ship that did this. And he actually didn't like the brutality of that. But apart from that, he really enjoyed the camaraderie on board the ship. And he said he went on board the whaler a big, straggling youth, and he came off a powerful, well-grown man. And the Arctic had awakened the soul of a born wanderer, he concluded many years later. And then this adventure... I know, I'm sorry, I'm very froggy tonight. And the adventure found its way into his first story about the... Oh, goodness, about the sea. A chilling tale called Captain of the Pole Star. See, he wrote loads of other stuff than just the Sherlock Holmes movie, which I didn't realise. I just thought he was a one-trick pony with the Sherlock Holmes, and then lost his marbles a little bit and went into the occult and spiritualism. But that's not true at all. He was a fascinating character from start to finish.
He was a bit. I mean, it's a bit like the enigma that was Terry Pratchett. It's another person I'd like to have, met and chatted to, but obviously I couldn't do so.
Well, I know quite a few mediums.
I know a few larges and a few smalls as well.
In 1880, he returned to his medical studies and obtained a Bachelor of Medicine and his Master of Surgery degrees. And he actually drew a picture of himself receiving his diploma with a little caption saying, "Licensed to kill." I thought that showed he had a really good sense of humour. It's quite deprecating as well.
When you listen to a lot of the banter that goes between Holmes and Watson, you can hear the humour in that, because it really does come across. Because you know that he didn't want, when he, when Holmes went off the cliff with Moriarty, that was it. Sorry, if you can hear anything in the background, we have a paranormal puppy growling at a bag. Anyway,
he's eating a shoe at the moment.
Turning into Chewbacca, and he's biting my rucksack for work. When he went off the cliff, that was going to be it. He didn't want to bring him back, but because the books were so popular, he basically got caned by people saying, "Bring him back, bring him back, bring him back, bring him back," and he really, really didn't want to.
He did. You're jumping ahead of the story, though.
Well, I'm terribly sorry.
Jumping ahead of my research a little bit there.
I'm terribly sorry, Lady Watson. Do carry on.
Don't call me Watson. I'm not a Watson.
Sorry, Moriarty.
I hate
Sorry,
you
Moriarty.
at times. I'm not a Watson. I'm just putting that out there right now. Anyway, after he graduated from university with his diploma, his first employment was actually a medical officer on the steamer, the Mayumba, which was a vessel that navigated between Liverpool and the west coast of Africa. But he didn't like that. Didn't like that at all.
What was it called?
The Mayumba.
Mayumba, I just like it when you say it. Carry on.
Anyway, after that, there came a short but quite dramatic stint with a not a very nice doctor in Plymouth. He wrote a vivid account of this 40 years later in the Stark Munro letters. And basically, he ended up on the verge of bankruptcy. And he left Portsmouth to open his first practice. Now, he rented a house, but he was only actually able to rent 2 rooms that his patients would see. The rest of the house was almost bare, and his practice was off to a rocky start. But, you know, in true gentlemanly style, you know, stiff upper lip and all that. He, I nearly said stiff upper back and then realised it was wrong, so upper lip. Oh dear. He really was hardworking and really compassionate. And then by the end of the 3rd year, his practice actually started to earn him quite a nice little income. But it wasn't really what he wanted to do, because he spent his time divided, because he was doing the doctoring thing and he was doing the writing thing, and he was sort of dividing his time between the two, and it was like a bit like split focus, you know?
Yeah.
Then he met Louisa.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
He met the lovely Louisa in 1885. He met Louisa Hawkins, who was the sister of one of his patients, believe it or not.
Whom he described in his memoirs as having been gentle and amiable.
Basically, willing to do whatever just to make his life more comfortable, I think that reads as.
A little bit submissive.
Yes. Just get on with it, girl, and just let him do what he wants to do, and just take care of the other stuff that he didn't want to worry about, like housework and cooking, probably.
That's enough about your Friday night.
Oh, my Friday night is ever so boring. Anyway, in March of 1886, he wrote a novel, and it was named A Tangled Skein, and involved 2 main characters, and they were called Sheridan Hope and Ormond Sacker. And the novel was published in Beaton's Christmas Annual under the title A Study in Scarlet, which actually translated into Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
It's the first time they ever appeared, wasn't it?
It was the first time they appeared. He changed the names to Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, and then began the story of a love-hate relationship he had with this character that he created.
Yeah, it did his head in.
A little bit.
I'll tell you something. Have you ever been down Baker Street?
Well, only through the tube.
No, I've walked down it. Because, well, you know, we used to live in London. We've walked down it, we've driven through it, and it's always packed. It's nearly always Japanese tourists as well. Sherlock Holmes! You know, taking photos and stuff. But,
is there like a museum or something down there?
There is a Sherlock Holmes museum, and you've got, is it 221B Baker Street, or whatever it was? Whichever the address is, you can go in there as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel.
I don't know if you still can, but you used to be able to. And there is a Sherlock Holmes museum down there.
There is. Well,
Yeah,
you've just informed me that there is.
There is, I've been there. It's got very quiet.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's all right.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's all right.
Well, it could have a lot more in there. It's all right.
Well,
but it also depends what time of the year you go as well, because they have different exhibits and things going on. So sometimes you'll have his, you know, when he was. Actually, I can't say too much because we haven't got to that bit yet. But sometimes you'll have different things.
You're learning. I get so annoyed when he jumps ahead in my research, and I'm like, where is he at? Anyway, he actually preferred his next novel, which was Micah Clarke. Now, this isn't really remembered as him writing this. But the Sherlock Holmes really quickly became world famous. But he actually thought it was quite commercial. He didn't feel like it was his best work. I get the vibe with him at this point in his life that he wanted to be taken as a credible writer. And Sherlock Holmes, he felt, that first movie, he felt was just like a bit of fluff. And because that got the acclaim and not his more serious novels, it annoyed him a little. But like I said, this started this, I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to say that because I don't know what that word means, but it sounds good.
Go on, say it.
Dichotomy, or whatever the word is. I don't even know how to say the word. Dichotomy, that's the word. That's the one I was searching for there. Anyway, he also wrote a very strange and confusing tale about the afterlife. And at this point, we start getting a theme of his interest in otherworldly things, of three vengeful Buddhist monks called the Mystery of Klumba. And this is kind of the point where you start realising he had this spiritualism, in interest in the paranormal and stuff. I'm being distracted at this moment in time.
And he also, believe it or not, if you read back along, in one of his tales of where he went somewhere, and it was on one of the ships, he swear he saw some, he didn't say aliens or UFOs, but he saw some flying discs at one point. I can't remember where it was. In one of his trips he did.
Wow. Oh my
aliens!
Goodness. Oh, every show. I actually pre-bleeped myself there. Did you hear it?
I heard you. I saw you. What you can't see, everybody out there. I could see her on the big screen, and she swore. She said every word.
But I didn't say it out loud. That's the main thing. Anyway, at this time, he was a better-known writer in the USA than in England. And in the August of 1889, Joseph Marshall Stoddart, who was the managing editor of the Lippincott Monthly magazine in Philadelphia, came to London. And he organised basically a meet and greet with Arthur Conan Doyle. And, get this, Oscar Wilde.
Lovely, darling.
Lovely, darling.
Lovely, super.
Now, Oscar Wilde at this time was actually really quite well known. And they got on really, really well. Conan Doyle and Wilde, all these names, got on incredibly well on that evening.
Not that well. They didn't get on and off and on and off.
Well, he did on that particular evening because he quoted it was indeed a golden evening for me, is what he actually said about that particular evening.
Okay.
And Lippincott, the managing editor of Lippincott's monthly magazine, actually commissioned the young doctor to write a short novel which was actually published in England and America in 1890. And this was the story called The Sign of Four, which actually established Sherlock Holmes and Arthur Conan Doyle once and for all in literature. That was the turning point for Arthur. I might just call him Arthur because Arthur Conan Doyle is quite a long name, really, isn't it?
Can't you do it in the voice of her from On the Buses?
Well, Olive.
And she says,
Arthur. Anyway, no, I'm not going to do that. That resonates in the past. Anyway, to write The Sign of Four, Arthur had to set aside time for The White Company, which was actually a historical novel he was writing at the time. And he said about that, it was the work he most enjoyed writing, but he sort of begrudged putting that to one side to write this Sherlock Holmes novel. And the main characters had the same traits of decency and honour, which guided he believed guided the author through his life. And 30 years after, he actually told a journalist he was young, full of the joys of life and action. And he goes, he thought he got some of that down into his writing. But when he wrote the last line, he remembered that he cried and said, well, I'll never beat that. And threw the ink pen at the opposite wall. He felt that particular novel, not the Sherlock Holmes one, but the White Company, was actually his standard piece.
His opus.
Yeah, his what?
Opus.
Opus?
Look it up.
I'm going to have to. I don't know what that word means.
His opus,
Lots of words tonight. dichotomy. Whatever that other word was. I was trying to be posh. I shouldn't really try, should I?
You keep trying to say dick, and it's like, we know you too well. It's dichotomy, not not dichotomy. Ladies and gentlemen, I do apologise for my co-host there. She's yes.
Don't even.
Yes.
No. Anyway,
we all know what she's like. She's twitching vaguely as she talks. It's quite disturbing. It's like phases in and out.
A finger right at this moment in time. That thank God we're not videoed. Anyway, at this point he went to Vienna and specialised in ophthalmology and onology.
Ophthalmology.
Thanks, James. See, my chat room loves me. Something to do with the eyes, anyway. Optician people, stuff to do with the eyes. Ophthalmology. See, it's all the ologies. I mean, why can't you just say something to do with the eyes?
Ophthalmology. Eye doctor.
Eye doctor, exactly. To become an eye doctor. Anyway, that didn't go very well, and that was because of the language barrier. Why he thought he could succeed in a foreign country when he couldn't speak the language, God only knows. But anyway, he came back to London.
That. Can you see my finger?
You can imagine, can't you? Going all the way to Vienna and then going, oh, I can't actually understand anybody. Eyeball mechanics, says Andy M in the chat room. I love that. Anyway, he then came back to London, opened a practice in an Upper Wimpole Street, but never didn't get a single patient. So all of that time he wasted, basically.
I was going to say, not a single patient in Wimpole Street, blimey.
I know. Anyway, at this time he met A.P. Watts, whose duty was to relieve him of hateful bargaining, who basically made a deal with the Strand magazine to publish the Sherlock Holmes stories. The image of Holmes was created by the illustrator Sidney Paget, who took his handsome brother Walter as a model for the great detective.
He thinks his own brother's handsome.
Yeah. No, he thought that A.P. Watts' brother was handsome. You can judge looks. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, especially when you ask them to dress up in a deerstalker, put a pipe in your gob. Yeah?
Anyway, in 1891, he actually became incredibly ill with influenza. And it was whilst he was ill and recuperating that he realised that he actually wanted to give up his medical career. He wasn't enjoying that at all, really. And he actually, really decided at that point that he wanted to become a full-time writer. And he says, and I quote, "I remember in my delight taking the handkerchief which lay upon the coverlet in my enfeebled hand and tossing it up into the air in my exultation. I should at last be my own master."
Well, I mean, why not? I mean, if you're ill, yeah, as he says himself, have a really good toss and he'll be his own master. That's cool.
Carry on.
You're right there. She's gone. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Kerry's gone. Hang on. In 1892.
Oh my God. Anyway, I'm going to carry on. I'm going to just talk over you. In 1892, Louisa actually gave birth to a son they named Kingsley, and she said about this was the chief event of their life. And we're going to have to move on a bit because we've got to get to the spiritualist stuff and we've still got pages to go yet.
You carry on.
Oh my God, I'm actually red and everything. A year later, in spite of everyone's entreaties, the amazing, prolific but very impulsive author decided to get rid of Sherlock Holmes. And in a trip to Switzerland, he found the spot where his hero was to come to his end. In The Final Problem, was published in 1893, Sherlock Holmes and Professor Moriarty plunged to their deaths at the Reichenbach Falls. I'm sure I said that wrong, but there you go. And as a result of this, 20,000 readers cancelled their subscriptions to the Strand magazine. 20,000.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, he eventually was forced to bring it back because he just didn't want to.
Thank you, James. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I couldn't have said it that badly. Anyway, he was now freed from his medical career and from Sherlock Holmes, who, like we said earlier, he didn't really like writing. He really didn't like it because he felt it was too commercial, and wanted to be able to immerse himself into more intensive activity. And whilst all this was going on, poor Louisa got diagnosed with tuberculosis and was only given a few months to live. But he stepped up. He actually stepped up and he actually looked after his wife. And he kept her alive for quite a long time.
Yeah, she was, as you say, she was only supposed to live for a few months, but she lived well into the new century. She did?
Yes, she did. She certainly did. He was writing continually, looking after Louisa, lost his father at this time, and, he actually became quite depressed at this moment in time, and then became more and more fascinated by life, life on the other side.
Ooh.
And
Shall we take a break
at this
then?
point, in 1893, that he joined the Society for Psychical Research, the SPR, and this was a public declaration of his interest and belief in the occult. And as we're going to quote Sherlock Holmes at this point, said, "Work is the best antidote to sorrow."
It's very true. It is very true, because it helped me.
I agree with that comment. Whenever I'm sad, I throw myself into my work. Anyway, and at that point, Conan Doyle then decides to go to America under the SPR to give a series of lectures. That's what he did.
You okay there?
Yeah, we need a break. I need to gather myself. I need to gather myself.
You need a drink. You need to get your composure.
Calm myself down and, unredden my face and, Anyway,
my job is
take a
done.
little break from the very lovely Harry Price, and we'll be back with you shortly.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?
Oh my goodness, you haven't not heard what happened during that break, and it's probably just as well. I'm still very red, and we are still going to continue with it. Anyway, we got to 1894, and he joined the SPR, and this is where we start with a little bit of the spiritualist side of the lovely Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, a guy, just this geezer, called
all right, geezer.
Colonel Elmore. Oh, I'm going all ghetto.
Elmo or Elmore?
He asked the organisation to investigate. He asked the organisation, which was the SPR, to investigate mysterious sounds emanating from his home in Dorset. At night, Elmore, his wife and adult daughter could hear chains being dragged across a wooden floor and moaning that sounded like a soul in torment. I mean, it's written just as you would imagine it to be written, to be said at that time, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a bit concerned about the moaning. If he had an adult daughter, I mean, was she sneaking the boot boy in or something?
Oh, goodness me. The family dog actually refused to enter certain parts of his home, and most of the Elmore's staff had left, so he went to the SPR and asked them to basically investigate for him. So Conan Doyle, Sir Sidney Scott and Frank Podmore, they were sent to investigate this alleged haunting, and they spent several evenings in their home. However, the results were inconclusive. However, I love the howevers in this. One night, the investigators were disturbed by a fearsome uproar, but no damage or cause. I know, gosh. But no damage or cause for the noise could be discovered. And let's just call him Conan. Conan the Barbarian left the Dorset home, unsure if it was genuinely haunted or if the haunting had been a hoax. However...
Hang on. If Conan the Barbarian left the building, you know what he said, don't you? I'll be back.
Oh, dear. And there's another however on this particular story, because later the body of a child approximately 10 years old was actually discovered buried in the garden, and Arthur became convinced that he had really had witnessed psychic phenomenon that was caused by the spirit of the dead child.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, did they ever find out who the child was?
I don't know. That's the only information I could find out on that case at this particular research level.
And as Ashley says, gosh, blimey, fellas, did you chaps hear that commotion upstairs? Just imagine him sat down in the parlour, can't you?
You can see it in your mind's eye back in the day, can't you?
Smoking jacket. And it's just, yes, I'll have his malt here, and... Damn your eyes, man! What was that? Fetch me my horsewhip.
That's a different station. That's the other station.
Hey, oi, easy tiger.
Oh dear, I keep referring to this other station. I really need to set that up. Anyway, in 1894, he actually sailed to New York with his younger brother, Innes. That's a funny name.
Innes.
Oh, Innes.
Innes.
Innes?
Innes.
Innes.
Innes. Innes.
It's still a strange name.
It's like Guinness without the G.
He was booked to give talks in more than 30 cities. 30! That's huge.
He was well known. He was extremely well known, and as he caused a major kerfuffle when he killed off Sherlock. So when people heard that Arthur R&B came back and went to America, they were like, "Yes, God damn it, we got to see him, boy." And then he turned around and said, "Good grief, we did give you your language, damn it. Could you please use it properly?"
Okay. He was a huge success. Yeah. Huge success.
Huge.
Absolutely huge success. Got a little bit big-headed,
You like that word, don't you?
I would say he got a little bit big-headed on the back of this. And then he returned to England in time for Christmas. And in the Strand magazine, the very first of the Brigadier stories... Sorry, the Brigadier Gerard stories... Oh, my house is active tonight. Which was an instant hit with the readers. Now, a trip with Louisa during the winter of 1896 to Egypt, where... Will you settle down? Sorry,
I'll try to.
Sorry, Okay, sorry. Anyway, back to the story. A trip with Louisa during the winter of 1896 to Egypt, he hoped the warmer climates would do her good, produced another of his novels, The Tragedy of Korosko.
Yeah, that's right. The Tragedy of the Korosko.
Oh,
yes.
Goodness.
Korosko.
Now we get to tragedy, guys. A little bit tragedy. He fell in love with a girl called Jean Leckie through this time.
Leckie? Is that like, have you put 50p in a Leckie meter? Is that like a euphemism?
No, I think it was more like put a little... No, I can't say that live on air. But he actually remained celibate to Louisa through this time. Now, Jean, we're going on to Jean now. She was strikingly beautiful, and she was very accomplished for those times. She was very intellectual. She was a good sportswoman. There was lots of things that attracted Conan Doyle to her. And also her family claimed to be related to the Scottish hero Rob Roy, believe it or not. And at the same period in time, Conan Doyle wrote a play about Sherlock Holmes. So he brought this play back. But...
She was 24 and blonde. That's what it was.
It's the blonde, isn't it? Maybe I should be blonde. Anyway, the very successful
24
American actor... I got told that today. You should be blonde. I was like, I've been blonde, done blonde. I'm now red, thank you. The very successful American actor William Gillet read the script but asked for permission to revise it, and Conan Doyle agreed. And he basically altered Holmes' persona completely. And Doyle said, "You may marry him, murder him, or do anything you like to him." This shows his disregard for Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, he didn't like him at all.
He didn't like him, but it was his, better... Oh, I don't even know what I'm saying now. Anyway, Gillette's revisions were sent back. There was very little of Conan Doyle's original script. The author the author's laconic comment to Gillette was, "It's good to see the old chap again." You know.
I normally do that when I shower.
What? Oh my God, you didn't.
So around say it's good to see the old chap again.
Oh my God. You said it. I didn't register it, and then you said it again. I was like, oh my God. Anyway, the play opened in London at the Lyceum Theatre in the fall of 1901, and critics panned it, but the public loved it. Which seems to be typical. This seems to be quite typical with Sherlock Holmes. He hates Sherlock Holmes, doesn't really like him, thinks it's so commercial. The public adore it, love it. And it sort of keeps building with poor old Sherlock, doesn't it? Now, in 1900, he volunteered for the Boer War, but was deemed unfit even for service. He was 40 at this time and quite overweight. So he went as a medical doctor, and he actually saw more soldiers and medical staff die of typhoid than of war wounds. Anyway, oh my goodness me. He wrote The Great Boer War, which was a 500-page chronicle published in October of 1900 and was a masterpiece of military scholarship. Now, this demonstrates how his mind is actually quite precision-pointed. He could see strategy. He could see... I don't even know.
He had a very tactile mind.
Thank you. Tactics. Stuff like that.
Yeah, he had a very tactile mind.
And he actually made astute and well-informed commentary about some of the organisational shortcomings of the British forces at the time. Will you settle down? I'm so sorry, everybody. My dog is wandering around and causing lots and lots of noise, and it's driving me a little bit insane. Anyway,
Boer War was the South African one.
Yes. Anyway, upon returning, he entered into politics. He ran for a seat in central Edinburgh and lost it. Basically didn't get elected at all. Then he... see? This is a favourite from a lot of people. Yes. Now, the inspiration for his next novel came from a prolonged stay in the Devonshire moors. I wonder what we could be talking about now. I do wonder. And it was based mainly on local folklore about an inhospitable manor, an escaped convict, and a huge black sepulchral hound.
What that would be?
I don't know. I don't know which play he's talking about here. Do you?
The Chihuahua of the Baskervilles.
That sounds good. The Chihuahua of the Baskervilles. The Hound of the Baskervilles was published in the Strand magazine in August of 1901. Now, it was at this point that Edward VII knighted Conan Doyle for services rendered to the Crown during the Hounds of What's It. Oh dear. He actually, he knighted Conan Doyle for services rendered to the Crown during the Boer War. And apparently, as gossip has it, the King was such an avid Sherlock Holmes fan that he made the author write some more, basically. And in 1903, the Strand magazine started serialising the return of Sherlock Holmes.
Can I just say something? When you drive across Dartmoor at night, because I've driven across it many, many times because I used to live down there, but when you go across there, and especially when you go towards the prison, or you go towards Widdicombe and stuff like that, especially when you're at the top near Hounds Tor, you can just see straight away, if you think about the Hound of the Baskerville, you can get it in your head and you'll swear you can see it across the top there. It's very, oh God, yeah, it's very atmospheric up there at night. Very.
There's
I've been up there with the army and
around
stuff.
that area, though, isn't there? Anyway.
Oh God, yeah, you've got the witch buried at the crossroads up there, Widdicombe as well.
Yeah, there's loads. When you look at that particular area, you can understand how that ignited his inspiration.
Grab your pen, old fellow, and crack on. Ashley, what you do in your spare time, mate's entirely up to you.
Oh, what is Ashley up to? Anyway.
No idea, but apparently he's grabbed his pen.
At this time, he was really busy at this time. Around this time, he was writing. He was looking after his Louisa. He was seeing old Jean Leckie on the side. He was playing golf.
And he tried politics again.
He was playing golf. He was driving fast cars. He was floating in the sky in hot air balloons. He
had a midlife crisis. That's what it was.
It does sound like he had a bit of a midlife crisis at this point. And he was flying in the very early stages of aeroplanes. And he even did a bit of bodybuilding.
Really? You'd never have thought it, would you? Okay.
I thought, no,
Writer Sherlock...
to be fair, that doesn't fit. That doesn't fit with the character
Writer Sherlock Holmes pumping iron. But that just, it doesn't, the two don't get together really, do they?
No. And he even had to go at politics again and lost again.
Yes, he did.
He did. In 1906, his beloved wife Louisa died, and again he got quite depressed and, basically started working again. And, he even started sticking his little nostrils in miscarriages of justice.
Are you okay there?
Am I okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. I'm absolutely fine. Just,
And you said sticking his little nostrils. I was like, no, Arthur Conan Doyle didn't do any of that.
Sticking his nose in stuff. He basically got in touch with Scotland Yard to point out a case of miscarriage of justice, which involved a young man called George Adulgy, who had been convicted of having slashed a number of horses and cows. And Conan Doyle observed that Adulgy's eyesight was so poor that it was proof that the convict couldn't possibly have done the awful deed. 7 years later, this remarkable man, who couldn't tolerate injustice and was captivated by yet another criminal, caused... hang on, I've lost my thread here. Several years later...
Yet another criminal cause celebraire.
That's it, celebraire. I don't know, what the hell is that? Is that a celebrity?
Celebrity case.
Oh, okay. The case of Oscar Slater, which he actually wrote in 1912, and basically gives a detailed summary of that affair. In 1907, he marries Jean Leckie, the little saucy minx that she was, and he also had a little small flat in London.
A boudoir.
And his writing slowed down a little, and he actually tried to write some plays at this point. One was based on Brigadier Gerard, and the other was on the tragedy of Corsica. These didn't do well at all. These didn't do very well at all. And then he wrote the Sherlock Holmes story, which is my favourite story out of all the Sherlock Holmes that there is, which is The Speckled Band, which was originally as a play.
There was one of my favourite ones was about, I can't remember the name of it, but it had a little tiny Indian pygmy guy in it with a blowpipe. I always remember it had that, and he'd been sneaked back from India, and he'd take people out and this and the other. It's to do with diamonds, I think. It was a good one.
Anyway, this was a play, and he insisted... I actually found this little story absolutely hysterically funny. The story goes that one of the difficulties of the production was the casting of the snake. I can imagine all these snakes lined up to do auditions. And the author, Arthur, insisted on a live reptile. With the actors and the crew actually did beg for an artificial one, but Arthur Conan Doyle won this case, so, won his live snake thing. But then later, after the show had gone on, he actually admitted he made a mistake and said about it, the python either hung down like a pudgy yellow bell rope, or else, when his tail was pinched, endeavoured to squirm back and get level with the stage carpenter who pinched him, which was not in the script.
Oh dear, that sounds like a bit of a farce there.
Now, this play actually got rave reviews and made the author an awful lot of money.
Can I just point something out? The original name of the play is The Stoner Cat.
I know, I tried to gloss that because of last week. I did try to gloss that, but, anyway, because I thought that was something completely different you were talking about. Anyway, banged out a few kids.
A stoner is a food item.
At this point, he banged out a few kids with the lovely Jean.
He banged out
a few kids. And then he went
I think his missus did.
He went on to his next creation, which was Professor Challenger, who his own wife called a perfectly impossible person. And this character is completely opposite from Sherlock Holmes. And The Lost World was an immediate success. Now, I didn't know.
I'm sure they made a film.
They did.
Oh, I didn't.
I didn't know he wrote this.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I didn't realise that.
it basically is a humorous adventure about people stranded in a mysterious region of South America discovering prehistoric fauna and flora.
The Valley of Fear.
Then
So I was just looking at
Valley of Fear, yeah. But see, the thirst for Sherlock Holmes was so much that, you know, he didn't really get away. He never really got away from Sherlock Holmes. He never really had.
That's what I meant by an opus. An opus is like your best thing you've ever done. And, you know, and he thought that other book was his best one and he wanted to write them. But because his Sherlock Holmes ones that he wrote just to make a bit of money got stupidly famous and made him a household name, you know, he's like, oh, bugger. So he had to begrudgingly carry on with it.
He did. But it was making him money.
It was. It made him lots of money.
A heck of a... And he funded trips. He went back to New York in 1914, didn't like it, went on to Canada, but actually came back because of the impending war with Germany. Now, he had already sent articles to newspapers about organising for military readiness many years before World War I broke out. In 1913, he wrote the Fortnightly Review, expressing his views about new untested warfare. And he said these new factors are the submarine and the airship. He foresaw the possibility of a blockade even, by enemy blockade, darling. By enemy submersible ships, long before anyone in the British Navy did. The only solution, he added, I love this, would be to build a channel tunnel. Years before his time.
They started trying to build that in Victorian era.
But the only solution would be to build the Channel Tunnel. But his warnings were judged to be Jules Verne fantasies by most naval experts.
See, now, Jules Verne fantasies by naval experts, I just get somebody going, that's a very good belly button.
Anyway. In July 1914, World War I broke out, and he offered to enlist again. Now, he was 55 at this time.
He was 55. And he was denied,
obviously. And he set out to organise a civilian battalion of over 100 volunteers. And then when the Navy lost more than 1,000 lives in a single day, he did have an absolutely brilliant mind, didn't he? Because he actually started making suggestions to the War Office to provide inflatable rubber belts and inflatable lifeboats. And he also spoke of body armour to protect soldiers on the front. So you can imagine his mind is still working completely on how, you know, the strategy and the tactics and how to win the war. Do you know what I mean? I mean, most people found him quite irritating. I can imagine he was probably a little bit stuck up and came across quite bombastic. But Winston Churchill...
Got me fantastic.
And fantastic. Who wrote to... Winston Churchill actually wrote to him to thank him for his ideas.
Yeah.
I think this is going to have to be a part 2 because we're actually running out of time. We've not even got to the juicy bits yet.
Oh. Oh, yeah, I've just realised that. I've been reading ahead and some of it's like, oh, blimey.
I know.
Yeah, I reckon.
I know. So we might have to do a part 2 next week on this, I think. That's where we're going to go with this.
Yeah.
Anyway, whilst writing the British campaign in France and Flanders, the author was actually given permission to visit the British and French fronts in 1916. And a while later, the Australian High Command invited him to observe their position on the River Somme. He witnessed the Battle of St. Quentin, and Conan Doyle said he would never be able to forget the horrors of the tangle of mutilated horses, their necks rising and sinking, lying amidst the blood-soaked remains of fallen soldiers.
That must have been absolutely horrific.
You can't even envisage it, can you?
Absolutely horrific. Yeah.
And on that note, Anyway,
we shall move on.
we move on swiftly. In late 1914, the author made up for the lacklustre reception of his second Sherlock Holmes novel with the publication of His Last Bow. And Sherlock Holmes infiltrates and vanquishes a German spy ring, a timely war propaganda story. And then Conan Doyle's sense of justice was awakened once again and made him rise to the defence of Sir Roger Casement, who was an Irish diplomat accused of being the foulest traitor who ever drew breath. Conan Doyle had known and liked the diplomat several years before, as the man had alerted him to awful injustices committed against the Congolese.
Yep, you got it, the Congolese.
The Congolese. The author had even based the character of Lord John Roxton in The Lost World on Casement. He did this quite a lot. He took somebody he knew and made them a character in his books. Now, this traitor was found guilty of having tried to get Germany's support for the Irish independent movement, and Conan Doyle almost succeeded in sparing the convicted man's life on grounds of insanity. Had it not been, this is a misfortunate set of circumstances, the discovery of Casement's diary, which actually talked about his homosexuality, which at this particular time was actually a criminal offence.
Yeah, you couldn't be batting for the other side then.
Mm-mm. You used to go to prison for it.
Oh, if you were in the First World War and you found out, that's it, you were shot. No whistle buts, you were taken out and shot, yeah.
Yeah, you were. Anyway, Conan Doyle's feelings about homosexuality were more liberal. He actually had quite a liberal, open mind in regards to this sort of thing. And they reckon that this is probably one of the reasons why he was not elevated to sit in the House of Lords.
See, back then it was pathetic. They were so repressed, you know. Everything was done behind doors and left over from the Victorian era, you know. Everybody had skeletons in their cupboard, but nobody would turn around and say, actually.
I don't know. I just think up to this point, we're gonna stop at this point because we are actually drawing to the end. We've only got a few minutes left of the end of the show. And so we're going to actually stop at this point because we go more into his spiritualist side going forward. And I think that deserves a whole hour all by itself, in all honesty. So we're going to continue with the subject of Arthur Conan Doyle next week because it's fascinating, actually. There's a particular case that he got involved in, which is the famous Cottingley Fairies, which I really want to talk about in quite in depth because it's an absolutely fascinating tale. In itself, even though we know it's faked, know it's faked. Everybody knows nowadays it's faked. But you have to put yourself, we talk about this quite a lot in the paranormal, you have to put yourself in context of the time that this happened. You know, the mindset, the sociological mindset that people lived under and the social norms that people lived under at the time. So we've kind of given you a really good overview of how prolific a writer he was, how he had this duplicity between, needing Sherlock Holmes, his writing of Sherlock Holmes in his life, but hating that particular character, and also taking people that he met and using their characters as inspiration for his writings, and how open-minded he was. And he explored so many different areas, he travelled quite extensively, he did talks, he was writing, but he also had really good standards and morals, didn't he, Mark?
Like the James Bond of his time, really, when you think about it. Very, very, very British, very British. Morals, knew what to stand up for and wasn't afraid to stand up for things, but and was quite laid back. In a lot of things. And I think there's a lot coming up in the next show that people might go, oh, blimey, at.
I think so. I do think so. I say we're going to continue this, next week because I think that's important. Because he's such a fascinating character, and one of the main points of the beginnings of spiritualism and investigation techniques and stuff like that. It's fascinating, and I found this whole journey of learning about it. I mean, I've spent nights looking at Arthur Conan Doyle, And he's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So join us next week because we are going to do part 2 of Arthur Conan Doyle, I feel, because we've only covered part of his life.
Well, yeah, you've got also the stuff that he did with the spiritualism. He had more than a few other famous authors in with him. Because whilst you were doing research, when I was at work, I was doing research as well, and I was quite surprised, especially at some of the names that he was associated with.
We're not going to talk about paranormal reality TV shows, Richard. I think
We're
I had
not.
enough of that last night. And if you listen to Monday's show, you'll hear me have a little rant about that, because I actually had a little rant off about paranormal TV shows on, and that will be
TV shows?
Yes,
No,
I
I'm on
did.
about
On the
the
Parasearch
society
UK
he was
Radio
with.
Encore show on Monday. You can re-listen to that particular show where I talk about that particular subject. Now, next week we've got some amazing shows as always. On Sunday, I've got Suzanne and Steve from the KTPF show. We play their shows out on a Thursday night, but I'm actually bringing them on for a live show, and that's what we're talking about. That's what I'm doing on Sunday night. So we're going to get to know the presenters behind the shows that we listen to on a Thursday. On Monday, we've got the Parasearch UK radio show where it's really a presenter rant. And yes, I do occasionally have a little rant to Ashley Nibb.
You never.
I did. Even Jay was taken a little aback on that one. So that's the Encore show on Monday. On Tuesday, we have got the Paranormal Concept with the Enigma Project. And on Wednesday, we're actually doing, I can never say this word, Paralogia Island.
Paralogia?
Yeah,
How are you spelling it?
Oh, it's the Haunted History Show. It's awesome. It's amazing. Listen in. I can't say the word. I never can. Even Penny laughs her head off.
Is it that one of the? Is it the one that used to be the leper colony?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Penny's talking about this week. Then on Thursday we've got the KTPF Reload show. Friday, part 2 of Sir Arthur. I keep saying Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. It's Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Then on Saturday, I have a girls' night out. And on Sunday, it's Mark Richardson. I've actually put that as a show, girls' night out. I don't think that is a show. I think that is me actually going out. So anyway, guys, join us throughout the week. We have shows going live every single night of the week. Follow us on Facebook. We have a group page. We have a like page on Facebook. You get to hear all sorts of stuff from the paranormal world, as well as updates on all of the shows. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you miss any of our shows, you can listen to us through our YouTube channel. And on that note, my lovely little Marky Mark.
I've got to say one thing before you go. San Lazzaro degli Armini. That's the island. That is the leper
That's
island.
not the island. I'm sure it's Povelgia or something like that.
I'm not. Do you know what? That sounded suspiciously like a product you would buy some Superdrug, but I'm not going to go there. I will say goodbye.
Say good night, my lovely.
Good night, my lovely.
Thanks for joining us in the chat room. It's been most entertaining as always, and we shall see you very soon, and I will see you on Sunday. Good night, guys.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.